All right, let's dive into one of the most, truly bizarre and important cases in the entire history of brain science. This is the story of Phineas Gage, a man who survived something that should have been impossible. And his survival, well, it ended up changing everything we thought we knew about who we are.
You know, that sounds like a crazy movie tagline, right? The man whose brain was pierced by iron with a new personality. But it's not fiction. It's the shocking, real-life summary of what happened to Phineas Gage. He literally took a massive iron rod straight through his head, and somehow he lived. But here's the twist. The man who walked away from that accident was not the same man who walked into it.
And it all went down in just a blink of an eye. You've got a normal workday, nothing special. Then, an unexpected spark, a sudden, violent explosion. And then, the unbelievable happened. After all that, Phineas Gage was still on his feet.
So, let's set the scene. We're going back to Vermont in the mid-1800s.
The date is September 13th, 1848. Phineas Gage, he's a railroad foreman, and he's good at his job. Well-liked, capable, a real pro. He's just getting ready to blast some rock. You know, a task he's done 100 times before. But this time was going to be different. Tragically different.
So the explosion happens, and it sends his tamping iron, we're talking about a metal rod over a meter long and pretty heavy, it shoots up like a missile. It goes straight into his left cheek, plows right through the front part of his brain, what we now call the frontal lobe, and comes flying out the very top of his head.
The force was just mind-blowing. After blasting clean through his skull, that iron rod landed more than 25 meters away. That's like half the length of an Olympic swimming pool. It was covered in, well, you can imagine. No one should survive that. The human body just isn't designed to take that kind of hit.
But here's where the story gets really, really weird. It's not about what happened, but what didn't happen. Gage didn't die. He didn't even pass out. His crew, they're just staring in complete horror as he just stands there and then calmly walks over to a cart so they can take him to a doctor. It's just unbelievable.
So the doctor shows up, probably expecting the worst, and Gage greets him by saying something like, "Doctor, I believe there is something strange in my head." Talk about an understatement. The guy's awake, he's talking, he's totally rational, all while having a giant hole clean through his skull. Physically surviving this was a true 1 in a million miracle.
Okay, so he survived the impossible, but as his physical wounds started to heal, his friends, his family, everyone who knew him, they started to notice that something was deeply wrong. The man standing in front of them looked like Phineas Gage, but in every way that mattered, he was a total stranger.
See, the before Gage was this model employee. Disciplined, calm, everyone respected him. But the after Gage, he was impulsive, used foul language constantly, and you just couldn't rely on him for anything. The change was so huge, so fundamental, that the very same company that had called him their best foreman, well, they wouldn't even give him his job back.
And this is the key observation coming from his own doctor. He pointed out that Gage's intelligence, his memory, all that seemed fine. He could still think. But his moral compass, his balance, as the doctor called it, that was gone. The very core of his personality had been destroyed. In the doctor's famous words, Gage was no longer Gage.
And this, right here, is where a terrible personal tragedy turns into a massive scientific breakthrough. Because this awful thing that happened to Phineas Gage, it gave scientists the first real, solid proof for a completely new and honestly radical idea about how our brains actually work.
You see, back then, most scientists thought the brain was just one big lump of tissue that kind of worked all together. The old belief was that it was a unified mass. But Gage's case just blew that idea out of the water. It showed for the first time that specific areas of the brain do specific things. And his injury pointed a giant flashing arrow right at the frontal lobe and said, "This part, this is where your personality lives."
Thanks to Phineas Gage, we learned that the frontal lobe is basically the CEO of your brain. It's the control center for your personality, for making decisions, for controlling your behavior, for managing your emotions. When that tamping iron destroyed Gage's frontal lobe, it destroyed the man he once was.
But the story doesn't just end there. Back in the 1800s, oh no, the legacy of Phineas Gage is still very much alive today, and it forces us to ask some really tough, really deep questions about what it even means to be us.
His case is literally textbook material. It's a cornerstone for anyone studying the brain today. And get this, if you go to Harvard's Medical Museum, you can actually see his skull with the hole in it, right next to the very iron rod that did the damage. It's a chilling, powerful reminder of this incredible story. So his story really leaves us with this huge kind of unsettling question, doesn't it? I mean, think about it. Are we just a reflection of what's physically happening inside our brains? If one piece of metal can completely rewrite someone's identity, what does that really say about who we are? Let's get even more personal. Is everything you call me, your hopes, your fears, your sense of humor, all of it, is it just a pattern of connections in your brain? A pattern that can be changed or even wiped out by a simple physical accident?
In the end, you could say that one man died on that railroad track, and another one was born. Phineas Gage didn't physically die that day in 1848, but the man he vanished. And his incredible story is a stark reminder that the self we feel so sure of might just be more fragile than we'd ever like to believe.